Hey all, so in this video, we're going to go over the practice AP questions at the end of the comparative advantage Google Slides. So let's get started. So our first question, right? So we see a production possibilities table for country A and country B, looking at the production of computers and cars. And the first question we have to ask ourselves is this an input or is this an output question? Well, we're going to say this is an output question. Why? Well, because we're looking at the production of computers and cars with equal amounts of resources. So we know that it is an output question. And so what this question is asking is basically what is true. So first let's figure out the absolute and comparative advantages, right? So the absolute advantage. So let's say who has the absolute advantage of the computers and who is going to have the absolute advantage in the production of cars. And so remember, for output questions, absolute advantage is who can produce more. So country A can produce 24 computers or 12 cars. Country B can produce 45 computers and 15 cars. Well, here, who has the absolute advantage in computers? Well, country A can only produce 24, country B can produce 45, so country B has the absolute advantage in the production of cars. Country A can only produce 12 cars, while country B can produce 15. So yet again, country B has the absolute advantage in both the production of computers and cars here. And so with that, we can knock off some answer choices, right? If we look at answer choice A, country A has the absolute comparative advantage in the production of computers. Well, that's not true, right? Because country B has the absolute advantage there. Yeah, and E we can knock off, right? Because we're going to say trade benefits both countries, right? Just depending on the terms of trade, right? So now we're down to B, C, and D. So now let's figure out the comparative advantage here. So here, right, for every one computer, how many cars is country A giving up? In other words, what is the per unit opportunity cost? Well, here, remember, it's output, so the other number goes over. Well, if we're looking at computers, what are we giving up? We're giving up cars. So we're doing 12 over 24 or 1/2 cars. And so here, for every one car, country A is going to be giving up 2 computers. Well, what about for country B? For every one computer, how many cars is country B giving up? Yet again, output other goes over, so 15 over 45 is 1/3 computers. And so that means for every one car, country B is giving up, or every one car, they're giving up 3 computers here. And so now, who has the per unit or who has the comparative advantage? Remember, to figure out comparative advantage, we want to look at the lower per unit opportunity cost. So for computers, for every one computer, country A is giving 1/2 a car. For country B, for every one computer, they are giving up 1/3 of a car. So what's smaller, 1/2 or 1/3? Well, 1/3 is. So country B has the comparative advantage for cars. That means country A has the comparative advantage for cars here. So now let's go through our answer choices again, right? Is B correct? Country B has an absolute and comparative advantage in the production of computers. Well, yes, because we said they have the comparative advantage or absolute advantage in the production of computers. And we just did it here, right? Country B has the comparative advantage in the production of computers because they have the lower per unit opportunity cost, 1/3 compared to 1/2. So B is going to be our correct answer. So for this one, right, we have our production possibilities graph or curve. It's not necessarily in a production possibilities table, but we're still going to do the same concept here. This question is asking just basically what is the per unit opportunity cost for producing 1 ton of grain? Well, here, right, for every 1 grain, what is, and let's say this is for alpha, right? So for every 1 grain, how many steel is alpha giving up? Well, it's 30 grain, 30 steel, so it's just 30 over 30. So for every 1 grain is 1 steel for alpha, right? Let's say, what about for country beta? For every 1 grain. Well, here, for country beta, they have 10 grain and 20 steel. And if we're looking at grain, what's the other number? Well, it's 20 steel. So 20 over 10 is 2. So we just have to look for the answer that says alpha is giving up 1 ton of steel, while beta is giving up 2 tons of steel. Is it A? No. Is it B? Yes. So the correct answer here is B. So question 33 it's saying, well, here, based on based on our per unit opportunity cost, well, who has the comparative advantage here? Well, here we said for alpha, right? They said they have 1 grain for 1 steel, and for beta, they have 1 grain for 2 steel. So who has the comparative advantage here? Well, it's alpha because they have the lower per unit opportunity cost here. Well, here then, if alpha has the per unit opportunity cost in the production of grain, they should export the grain and solely produce grain and then trade for the steel. So that means A, let's put it in red so it's easy to see, A is going to be our right answer here. Remember, if someone has a comparative advantage, they should only produce that good, specialize in the production of that good, and then trade for the other good that they don't have. All right, so this question. Well, what then is an acceptable terms of trade? Right, so yet again, we said we had 1 grain, 1 steel, 1 grain, 2 steel. And so remember, an acceptable term of trade is anything in between our 2 per unit opportunity costs. So that means anything between 1 and 2. So 1 grain for 1.1 steel all the way up through 1 grain for 1.9 steel. So is A an acceptable term of trade? Well, no, because here, 3 tons of steel, the beta country will just not trade and just produce it themselves. So it's not A. Is it B for 1.5? Well, yeah, that's anywhere in between 1 and 2. So B is our correct answer. Number 50. If 2 countries specialize in trade according to comparative advantage, which of the following has to be true? Well, A, a smaller number of goods will be available in each trading nation. Well, the answer is no, right? That's not possible. In fact, a larger number of goods would be available in each trading nation because if they specialize and devote all their resources towards the production of the good, at the end of the day, they can produce more goods. So A is incorrect. B, the total world production of goods will decrease. Yet again, that's wrong, right? Because it will actually increase. So B is incorrect. C, everyone within each nation would be better off. Maybe. So let's go through the rest of them. D, each nation would increase its consumption possibilities, which is just another word just for saying our PPC is going to shift outward. And E, one nation would gain at the expense of the other nation. Well, that's not true. If they're trading within the terms of trade, right, then that means that both nations are going to benefit. So here, our correct answer is D. So the reason why C is incorrect is everyone within the nation will be better off. Well, that's not entirely true, right? The companies that used to produce the other good, right, wouldn't be better off because now the second country is specializing in producing that good instead of the home country. All right, so the last thing we're going to go over is this 2008 FRQ. So we're talking about Artland and Rayland with 600 hats, 300 bicycles, and Rayland with 1,200, 300. And so the first question is asking us to calculate the the opportunity cost of a bicycle in Artland, right? So this is essentially our graph here, or our table here. So we have Artland can produce 600 hats, 300 bicycles. Rayland can produce 1,200, 300 bicycles. So before we just move on, right, let's just do the opportunity cost for each one of these things. So for Artland, right, 1 hat, this is an output question, so it's just other goes over, 300 over 600, so for 1/2 bicycles. And then we could just take the inverse here. 1 bicycle, they're giving up 2 hats. Well, for Rayland, right, for every 1 hat, they're giving up 1/4 of a bicycle. Why? Well, 300 over 1,200 is 1/4. And so that gets us there. And then for bicycles, for every single bicycle, Rayland is giving up 4 hats here. So now, who has the comparative advantage in the production of hats? Well, Rayland does. Why? Well, because remember, we have to look at the per unit opportunity cost. Artland, for every 1 hat, is giving up 1/2 a bicycle. Rayland, for every hat, is giving 1/4 of a bicycle. 1/4 is smaller than 1/2, so Rayland has the comparative advantage in the production of hats, which means, right, that Artland should have the comparative advantage in the production of bicycles here. So here, right, A, calculate the opportunity cost of a bicycle in Artland. Well, here, what we just did, we did that, right? So for Artland, for every bicycle, how many hats are they giving up? So we have to look at what we did right here. Right? We already did that. So here the answer is going to be 2 hats. Part B. If the two countries specialize in trade, which country will import bicycles? Explain. Well, yet again, let's go back to the chart that we did. Well, here we said that Rayland has the comparative advantage in the production of hats. So they're going to specialize and solely produce hats. Artland has the comparative advantage in the production of bicycles. So Artland is going to specialize and only produce bicycles here. So if our question is asking us which country will import bicycles, well, the correct answer here is Rayland. And then explain. So because, whenever you see the word explain, you have to have the word because and explain it, because they have the comparative advantage in hats and will trade for bicycles. For bikes. Right. So part C. If the terms of trade are 5 hats for 1 bicycle, which would trade be advantageous for each of the following, Artland and Rayland? So here, right, we're looking at 1 bicycle for 5 hats, right? 1 bicycle for 5 hats. Well, here we know that Rayland can produce 1 bicycle for 4 hats. Artland can produce 1 bicycle for 2 hats. So here, who is actually going to benefit from here? Well, Artland is going to benefit. So yes, advantageous. Why? Well, here, because they're only giving up 2 hats to produce a bicycle, but now they're getting 5 hats in exchange. So they're gaining 3 extra hats here. So Artland, this trade is advantageous for them. Rayland, no, not advantageous. Why? Well, here, Rayland can produce by themselves 1 bicycle and they're only giving up 4 hats. But if the term of trade is 5 hats, that means that they would rather just produce it themselves, right? Because now it costs them, the opportunity cost of producing a bicycle is now less, right? 4 is less than 5. And because of that, right, it is not advantageous for Rayland. And so our last question, if productivity in Artland triples, which country has the comparative advantage in the production of hats here? Well, this should be pretty simple. It's going to be Rayland, right? And the reason why we know it's Rayland, we're going to write this in light blue, because if we triple, right, so 1200 times 3 is 3600, 300 times 3 is 900. Well, yes, their production tripled, but the per unit opportunity costs are still going to remain the same, right? 900 over 3600 is still 1/4. And then 3600 over 900 is still 4, right? So here, right, the comparative advantage doesn't really change because the per unit opportunity cost did not change once productivity tripled. All right, so that's all I have for you guys today. If you still have questions, feel free to email me or to bring it up in our next Google Meet. All right, guys, peace.